Alrighty, David, are you ready to talk about the Fed's framework review and NGDP targeting?
Absolutely.
So, David, what is the framework review?
The framework review is a process that happens every 5 years by the Federal Reserve, and they undertake a public review of monetary policy strategy, tools, and communication. Now, the FOMC, or the Federal Open Market Committee, is the body of the Federal Reserve that will do this. They did this last time in 2019, 2020. So the 5 years are up, and here we are on the cusp of the 24-25 framework review. Now, last time they focused on the strategy or the framework itself, and most likely they'll do that this time, which means they're going to focus on the big change they made last time, which is a flexible average inflation target. Previously, they had a flexible inflation target. They added the average. So they're going to look at this term, the average, in this review of the framework. This can be seen as a review and a further refinement of the Fed's approach to implementing its dual mandate of price stability and maximum employment.
And David, why does it matter?
The framework review matters immensely for 3 reasons. First, it will determine the future of the price level. Where will prices be in 5 years, 10 years? How much more will clothing, food, and cars cost? The Fed has a big say in this because it determines its target inflation rate, how fast prices will grow. It also will determine whether to keep the average in its flexible average inflation target, which is makeup. It means that if the Fed misses its inflation target, it will make up for it. That too can affect where the price level will be. That's the first reason. The second reason is this framework review will determine how responsive the Fed is to swings in the business cycle. When unemployment goes up, will it step in quickly, moderately, or slowly? Finally, this process is taking place with little oversight from Congress. This is an amazing delegation of power from Congress to the Fed. There is no reporting body. This is not a part of a normal federal regulatory process, no GAO, no IIG for the Fed. So the Fed is using a lot of delegated power in a manner that many people often overlook, but it's very consequential.
So, David, what are the problems with FAIT?
There are 3 problems that have been observed about the FAIT framework first introduced in the fall of 2020. The first is that it makes up for shortfalls of inflation below 2%. Now, that below 2% works when we have a low inflation environment, but when we have a high inflation environment, like the inflation surge of 21-22, it fails. In fact, some have said that the FAIT framework failed the stress test of the inflation surge. The second problem with FAIT is that it has a focus on the shortfalls from maximum employment. Prior to 2020, it would respond to overshoots of employment and undershoots. Now it only responds to undershoots. This means the Fed cannot look at an overheated labor market, at least on paper, if it is following the FAIT framework. The third point is that the Fed effectively abandoned this approach in early 2022, when it began to focus solely on inflation and the surge that was happening. So the FAIT framework was geared toward a low inflation environment and added an inflationary bias, as some have suggested, and it did not work well, and some have said it failed the test of the 21-22 inflation surge. As a result, the bottom line is that FAIT does not seem to be a very robust framework to very different environments. It can handle a low inflation environment, but it does not seem able to handle a high inflation environment. We want a framework that can do that.
Given the problems you just outlined, what are some solutions to these issues?
Yeah, so a number of commentators have thought about this and come up with a list of 7 solutions for improving the framework. The first is simply to make it more robust to various scenarios. FAIT is well suited for a low inflation environment. It's not well suited for a high inflation environment. So make it capable of responding equally well to both settings. Secondly, make FAIT able to respond in a symmetric fashion to all shocks. In the case of maximum employment, it only responds to shortfalls currently. Many observers have questioned this and suggest it might be well for it to have a symmetric response in that setting and overall, a symmetric response to whatever unfolds in the economy. Third, you want a framework that is resilient to supply shocks. When supply shocks hit, it can move inflation away from the Fed's target, so you want to be able to see through those supply shocks, but you also want to maintain a firm nominal anchor, which gets us to our fourth point. You want a framework that is able to create a stable nominal anchor. That means keep the economy grounded so that prices don't explode. Number 5, we want to maintain a framework that does make-up policy. Now, FAIT does this well, but we want to do it without all the baggage that FAIT brings along with it. 6, we also want a framework that's easy to communicate. FAIT is not an easy framework to communicate. How do you communicate shortfalls from maximum employment? How do you communicate makeup on inflation only from below? Very difficult to tell to the community. Finally, you want a framework that promotes financial stability. All of these 7 suggestions have been brought forth as a way to improve FAIT in this next framework review.
So David, you listed 7 fixes you'd like to see from the Fed's current framework. Do you have a framework that can solve all 7 issues?
Absolutely. The framework is a nominal GDP level target. In a nominal GDP targeting framework, the Fed would aim to stabilize the dollar size of the economy. For every dollar you spend, there's a dollar earned, and the Fed would aim to stabilize how rapidly that grows. Now, this framework would meet the 7 ideal characteristics of a framework. Number 1, it would respond to all scenarios. It would be robust to both inflation and deflation. Secondly, it would provide a symmetric response to such scenarios because it responds to both above and below deviations from target. Third, it would be resilient to supply shocks. It is by definition looking only at total dollar spendings. It does not care about supply shocks and the short-term effect it would have on inflation. So it would see through those supply shocks and their inflationary effects. Fourth, it would therefore also be a nominal anchor because it is anchoring the dollar size of the economy. 3 and 4 go together. If you can anchor the dollar size of the economy, you can look through those supply shocks without worrying about inflation expectations taking off. Fifth, it would do makeup policy since it's a growth path or level target. If the Fed fell behind on its target, it would make up for it whether it's above or below. It would also be easy to communicate. Number 6, because a nominal income target is one where the public would understand the Fed is trying to stabilize their dollar incomes. Finally, number 7, it also aims to stabilize financial stability. If the Fed can keep nominal incomes or dollar incomes growing on a stable growth path, it's easy for households and businesses to meet all their financial obligations. A nominal GDP level target is one that meets all 7 characteristics and is one that should be considered by the Fed in the framework review.
So David, what role can NGDP play in the framework review?
Well, I would love if the FOMC would adopt it as the framework, but I'm under no illusion that they will. Therefore, my hope is that they can use nominal GDP level targeting as a benchmark, as a goalpost for evaluating the changes they make to the existing FAIT framework. Nominal GDP level targeting can be viewed as an optimal approach to implementing the dual mandate the Federal Reserve has been given to it by Congress: price stability and maximum employment. A nominal GDP level target is probably the best way to do that, and my hope is they use it as a benchmark in making their decisions.
Where can people learn more about NGDP level targeting?
Check out the amazing collection of essays we have on this page that covers all the topics and issues surrounding nominal GDP level targeting and how the Fed could implement it. Everything you need is there.